Hey everyone, it's Tim here midweek for an update. Hope you're doing well, and I want to continue with something I've done intermittently with these videos and review children's Bibles or children's kind of story Bibles. I've looked already at the Child Story Bible by Catherine Vos and the Big Picture Story Bible by David Helm. And for the third installment, I want to look at one that isn't actually a story Bible. It's a little different. I want to explain. It's called The Ology by Marty Mikowski. And this is, Lord willing, not the only Marty Mikowski book that I'll review. There's another one that's more of a children's story Bible that I do want to look at later. But this one's a little different in that it's about the length of a lot of these story Bibles. But instead of going through the biblical narrative and telling kind of the major events, major stories like these books tend to do, it's actually more of a kid's version of systematic theology. So to just give you a high-level overview of what that means, so it's not so much telling the story of Scripture as bringing out the categories of what Scripture teaches, the doctrinal categories, and explaining them on the basis of Scripture. So it's organized more by these topics, these theological topics, the doctrine of God, the doctrine of man and of sin, doctrine of Christ and salvation and so on. So it follows those kinds of categories. In that sense, it's unique as far as I know. I don't know of any other kids book that's trying to do the same thing in anywhere near as comprehensive a manner. And I've gone through it with our kids and we really liked it. There's a parent's guide that says kind of how to use it for different ages. And they started kind of early elementary. Of course, we weren't all in elementary. Our kids, I think they were able to hang on a little bit younger than elementary, but maybe around, depending on what your kids are up for in terms of reading, around early elementary or a little younger might be a good time to start. And it would probably be useful well into elementary school for kids. And what I like about it is the entries are a good length. They're well written. They're understandable. And they also, at the end, there's a kind of a study guide with questions about every lesson, one or two questions that you can ask your kids kind of following up from the lessons, from the reading. So just to give you a sense of kind of how it's written and the style, I'm just going to read a little bit from the entry on it's called Chosen. This is article number 39, which is having to do with the doctrine of election. So it says, imagine going to an ice cream parlor on a hot day to buy an ice cream cone. The hardest part is trying to decide which flavor to get. Some people love chocolate and will only choose ice cream with chocolate in it. Others enjoy big, chewy chunks of candy in their ice cream. But what if you went into an ice cream shop and none of the flavors had any appeal? Imagine flavors like Stinky Sneaker, Mildew Swirl, and Earthworm Chunk. You would most likely leave the shop without getting anything. We choose ice cream that tastes good. But when God chose us to be a part of his family, we were yucky, spoiled sinners. Not one of us was good. God didn't choose us because he needed us or because we had some special quality. God chose us while we were still sinners, just because he decided to love us. And he goes on, and that's about half of the article, goes on to explain this doctrine and how you see it in the Bible. And each of these articles has also a number of cross-references. There's a few scripture references that it gives so that maybe parents could look them up with their kids. There's a lot of different ways you could use it. So I recommend it. And again, I think it's unique. I don't know of any other kids' books that are trying to do the same thing. I very much commend using a children's Bible that's going to give kids a sense of the story of Scripture, the big storyline, as well as a lot of the individual stories and narratives. But kids who are maybe having devotional reading with their parents, coming to Sunday school, things like that, they're probably hearing the stories a fair amount. I think it's helpful to also mix in the doctrine, to be explaining who God is, what sin is, and what Christ has done to save us, and so on. So I think a really good blend of both, the narrative as well as the theological categories can be very beneficial for kids. So I highly recommend it and commend it to you. Moving on, regarding schedule updates for our church, we have our summer schedule continuing on Sunday, so there's no equipping hour that goes on, and we have our corporate worship gathering at 10 a.m. We also, because it's the third Sunday of the month, we have an evening service at 5 p.m. where we'll, in addition to other things, we'll be observing the Lord's Supper. So I do want to highlight that for you and encourage you to be there. I look forward to seeing you Sunday, and I trust that you're doing well in the grace of God. And until then, bye-bye.